This is a pretty heavy topic, so hopefully I'm able to go about it in the right way. If you disagree with me, that's fine. And if you end up enjoying this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe and turn on the bell notifications, as that helps immensely. I want to try and hit 300K by the end of the year. That would be awesome. But what do I mean by violence in entertainment? To make it pretty clear, I'm essentially referring to the violence or evil actions that are depicted within a story, the stories we watch and read, more specifically in anime and manga, but I feel like this could apply to entertainment in general, so that'll probably just be the title of the video. Recently, Berserk went trending on Twitter, with some people taking exception to the way that Berserk presented certain things. Now, a good amount of these people seemed like they hadn't read the story and they were seeing things out of context, so I mean, just that alone completely invalidates whatever is said. But it brought up an interesting topic that me and some of my friends were going back and forth on, and that I myself internally was thinking about a lot the last week. And I think it's the misunderstanding whenever violence or evil is depicted in a story. I don't think this is an issue that the majority have, as I think most people understand villains doing villainous things is, well, what they're supposed to do. But many times I see people kind of really go at an author and a story for getting into subjects that many times can be uncomfortable. Now, I want to clarify just right now, if you aren't comfortable and you're not enjoying a story that you're reading, you are no obligation to keep reading that story. I've dropped many stories before that have gone very far in the gore spectrum, and listen, that might come as shocking for some of you knowing what I read. But what bothers me immensely is when a story goes into or depicts a specific evil action and people automatically jump to, oh, this story or this author supports this. Where do you get that from at all? For example, in Berserk, when the story goes into subjects such as sexual assault, especially pertaining Donovan and Guts, the story is in no way, shape, or form supporting the action of sexual assault or rape. But if not, it's an evil action being shown in the story for what it is, an evil and atrocious action that instantly marks and traumatizes another person's life. If you have a character who's an absolute human piece of garbage and treats his family terribly, a good example, Endeavor, then the story nor the author is in support of those things. They're simply showing a flawed and messed up character who needs to grow. Another example would have to be Attack on Titan. The amount of times I saw people accusing Attack on Titan of supporting Nazism and genocide when it's simply presenting it as the evil action that it is was beyond me. And look, you'd have to take these things case by case, because yes, there are stories and moments within stories where one could look at that and argue that it doesn't contribute anything narratively, it doesn't set the tone of the world, this means nothing to the characters, it's just there for mere shock value, and you can criticize it for what it is. Just mere crappy shock value. But to kind of look over every single evil action done within a story and then take them out of context and accuse the story of supporting these evil things, it has always been something that has bothered me so much, because it's truly missing the point of those actions. It's not supposed to be entertaining. You're not supposed to find that likable. You're meant to feel uncomfortable and disgusted at what these characters are doing. That's the whole point of it being shown. And I've seen some people argue, well, why not just say it? Well, that's because not everything is told or implied. Some stories prefer show, don't tell. Personally, I prefer stories that are show, don't tell, as I think it's much more effective at really being able to hook the reader emotionally into what's happening. But that's just my personal opinion on that. But yet to condemn a story entirely for having moments where it depicts the evils of humanity, that can happen in real life, but choosing to depict it in this fictional setting in order to create this evil conflict in the world that our protagonist has to deal with, or vice versa if the protagonist is extremely evil, has always been just so odd to me. We don't look at every character who kills in a story and goes, oh, this story supports murder. But I think that could partially be due to the fact that we've become so desensitized to death in our media that we consume. But my point is that it's odd to me when a series is willing to delve into other topics that are a lot more difficult to discuss and to convey with characters. And I've always thought that to be some of the hardest hitting moments in the series once it's contrasted with light moments. If a series is just nothing but that, then go crazy. There have been some series that I've read that are 90% just that, and I actually went into one of those series pretty recently. But imagine if every story was just lacking in those evil elements. No story was willing to push the boundaries and address those things. To me, that's what's weird. Again, if you're uncomfortable or you don't like what you're reading, you are in every right to not like it and not read it. But to then want to set these boundaries on what stories can or cannot do, I'ma just be honest, is beyond corny. And you can be vocal about how you don't like the story for that. We could disagree at the end of the day, but to then accuse that story for supporting an ideology or an evil action that's being committed is where you're tripping. And also, this extends into a slightly different topic, but I think there's been a lack of an appreciation recently for just pure evil antagonists. People who don't have this moral gray dilemma within themselves. Just someone who pulls up and is completely evil. They are there solely to conflict with the protagonist. And I think that can be done very, very, very well. And there are a plethora of examples. Don't get me wrong, a morally gray antagonist can be just as compelling. Again, this is a case-by-case thing. But going back to it, as I thought about it more and more, I wondered how much violence is too much violence? How much evil is too much evil? What is the limit of what you can depict in a story? And for the most part, I think that's just a very personal and individual line where everybody's comfortable with different things. I think there's, of course, a set of things that I won't get into because of monetization purposes that your story just couldn't get published if you fully depicted those things as graphically as possible. But specifically when it comes to a series like a Berserk, like an Attack on Titan, like a Gantz, like even a Pun Pun, if you will, Homunculus, Fire Punch. These are all stories that do get into some pretty heavy topics, but I think it's those stories willing to go there that they use those dark moments simply to contrast the beauty that those stories actually have. There is a purpose and a reason many times for why they're depicting this kind of thing. It's not just nonsensical violence and nonsensical evil throughout the entire story, which if it was, trust me, I would be criticizing it for just being nothing but pure shock value, something I said earlier. Once again, to reiterate, this is a little bit tricky of a subject to get into because there's so many different moral boundaries regarding what someone is willing to see a story talk about or show. On top of that, I think it's really one of those things, again, that you'd have to go case by case and be like, okay, this actually has context to it. This is the same with or without context. But I think when it's done well, evil and violence and entertainment is what truly adds conflict to the story. Without those things and without the conflict, these stories would fall flat. There would be nothing for our hero to have to contend with or to conflict with, whether it be other forces or themselves. There would be no growth, there would be no rising action, there would be no climax, there would be nothing to these stories, with the exception of a slice of life or a comedy per se. But when a story is willing to include violence and evil and push the boundaries a little bit and manages to do it well, instead of condemning these stories by saying they support whatever it is, fill in the blank, you should just see it for what it is. An evil action done by evil and flawed characters. Hopefully y'all enjoyed this video, and hopefully I was able to make my thoughts clear. And if you did enjoy it, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell notifications. This has been the Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.